Review of A Time and a Tide, the memoir of Charles Kao. I was aware of Sir Charles Kao's accomplishments in his varied career as a renowned researcher and top executive at ITT, founder of the Department of Electronics and later Vice Chancellor of the Chinese University of Hong Kong. He received the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2009 and was regarded as, quote, the father of optical fiber communication, end of quote. I was, however, not aware that he had an excellent writing style until I read A Time and a Tide, a memoir consisting of 16 chapters. It is unclear whether the memoir was a joint effort with his wife, Kwan. I venture to guess that the first 14 chapters, narrated in first person, were primarily written by Charles, with revisions by Kwan. The last two were clearly written by Kwan. The beginning parts of the book were concerned with Charles growing up in Shanghai and Hong Kong. It is interesting that he was able to relate his early learning experience in several famous sayings of Confucius. Quote, to learn and on occasion to repeat is what one has learned. Is that not what, after all, a pleasure, end of quote. That's the first one of Confucius. Second one, quote, search and search again as a way to discover new facts, unquote. Third one, quote, when three people appraise you, one must be your teacher, end of quote. They were translated into English in the memoir, but it is easy to identify the original quote in Chinese. Charles believed that the second quote points to Confucius being the first to arrive at the modern concept of research. What a keen observation. Besides Confucius, it appears that Charles was well versed in the poems of the Tang Dynasty. In describing his leaving Hong Kong for London to attend university, he quoted a famous Tang poem that expresses a mother's concern about her departing son. Quote, she knitted the sweater with care, stitch by stitch, till it was well made and complete for the son who is departing for long, end of quote. 慈母手中線，遊子身上衣。行行密密縫，意恐遲遲歸。誰憐寸草心，報得三春暉。In the chapter entitled, quote, The Great, the Rich, and the Powerful, end of quote, the author told of his encounters with such people, among them Prince Philip, Princess Anne, Yo-Yo Ma, Shirley MacLaine, Milton Friedman, Chen Yang, which was misspelled as Young in the book. Somewhat unexpectedly, but a clear sign of his compassion for all humanity. Charles also devoted sections in this chapter to several folks who work for his family: au pairs, maids, chauffeurs. Several of them became his friends, and Charles remained in touch with them long after their services. Charles and his wife Kwang were world travelers. The chapter Wedding Anniversary is especially interesting. It began with the observation, quote, "Today we constantly hear about short-term relationships and divorce and very little about long-lasting marriages," end of quote. It then tells the different places in the group that Charles and Kwang celebrated their anniversaries, a different place each year. In addition to traveling, they had lived in several continents: Asia in Shanghai and Hong Kong, Europe in London, and America in Virginia, Connecticut, and California. The book contains brief instructions to the cultures of these places, including racial discriminations they experienced. As someone who grew up in Guangzhou and Hong Kong, served as a faculty member in the Department of Electronics at the Chinese University of Hong Kong for 11 years, in the mid-70s to the mid-80s, traveled to Europe a number of times for meetings and sightseeing, and have lived in various places in the U.S., I find much resonance in Charles' reminiscences. The second last chapter is entitled The Slow Death, obviously written by Kwang. It is a poignant description of their lives when Charles was afflicted with Alzheimer's. The last chapter, written by Kwang in the first person, contains a detailed and informative account of what took place in a Nobel Prize ceremony. The book ends with not a bang, but a whimper. Quote, "We flew from Stockholm early that Saturday morning after an exciting week of Nobel celebrations as the first flakes of snow were beginning to fall. The depths of winter were about to begin." End of quote. I do not detect a trace of sadness in the ending. The life of Charles Kao was one for celebration, not for sadness. End of my review.